we're now going to move on, and we're going to be joined by Matt Crowe on Zoom. Hopefully the technical side will stand up to it, but just to introduce him, Matt is currently chair of An Fóram Uisce, the National Water Forum, and he's also chairing the Project Woodland Working Group on a Shared National Approach. He retired in 2020 from the EPA, having served 10 years as one of our directors and having been 15 years prior to that as a member of staff. Can you hear us, Matt?
I can, Sharon. How are you?
I hear you. Great to have you. You're very welcome. Look, I'm sure you've been following the discussion so far, and I have a feeling that Connor's piece there probably is going to tee you up nicely. So I'll hand over to you, Matt.
Okay, thanks very much, Sharon. And hello, everybody. I'm not quite as far away as Deborah is. I'm down in Wexford. And, you know, I always enjoy a trip to Crowe Park, and maybe myself and Connor will be heading up from Wexford later in the year to support the hurling team. Who knows what's going to happen during the summer. So today, I just want to focus in on one area, but it's an area that we've got complete control over in Ireland, over what we do, and that's the question of what we do with our land. So, and I want to talk in particular about our land as a sink, a source, and a store of carbon. So the first point I wanted to make was that our peatlands, organic soils and forests are a major store of carbon. And we need now to do everything we can to protect what is already there and prevent carbon from leaking into the atmosphere, particularly from our peatlands and organic soils. And I just want to invite you to think of our peatlands as our rainforests. They're the Irish version of a rainforest. Like they store an incredible amount of carbon, and we now know how important it is to preserve that carbon and keep it where it is, and ideally to build on it over the course of the next number of decades and centuries. But I guess the bad news is that at the moment, because of the way that we manage our land in Ireland, the land is actually a net source of carbon. It's not a net sink. So every year there's between 4 to 5 million tons of carbon is lost from our land. The peatlands and the organic soils are the main source of that carbon. The forests that we have are the main sink. But when you add it all up and balance it all out, roughly between 4 to 5 million tons of carbon dioxide is escaping from the land into the atmosphere every year. That equates to about 14,000 tons every day, or the annual carbon footprint of over 700,000 people. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make here is it's a lot of carbon dioxide that's simply been lost from the land every day. And unfortunately, it looks like it's going to get even worse over the next 10 years. And the reason being that forestry, the forestry that we have in Ireland now is getting to a point where a lot of the forestry is mature enough for it to be harvested. So there'll be quite a bit of harvesting happening over the next decade. And that's twinned with very low current rates of new afforestation. So Brian mentioned earlier that the Climate Action Plan has a target of 8,000 hectares per annum for new afforestation. The levels at the moment are way lower than that. And they're not even high enough to reach the national target of 18% land cover from 11% as it currently is by 2050. That actually would require planting rates closer to 20,000 hectares per annum. So there's a lot of issues have to be worked out to get to a point where we're able to actually plant more trees and make it easier for landowners and farmers in particular to do that. So like the point here is that we could end up in a situation in 10 years' time where there's even more carbon being lost from our land than currently. And that's not a place that we want to be in. So we need to be a lot more ambitious about reversing this and transforming our land into a net carbon sink as quickly as possible. And this means thinking about land in a different way, like thinking about it as a long-term sink and store for carbon. You could think about it as a workhorse for carbon sequestration and storage. Our land as a net carbon sink should also be one of the foundation stones of sustainable food production and sustainable land management, along with protecting nature and water quality. So it really needs to be a cornerstone of sustainable food production in Ireland. And like if we continue down the path where land is actually a source of carbon, it's going to undermine the case for us being really good at sustainable food production. So what can we do about it? Well, there are three things that come to mind. The first is that we have to do far more to protect the carbon already stored in our soils and peatlands and trees, to hold on to what we already have. The second one is that we have to plant a lot more trees, but the right trees in the right places for the right reasons, with the right management, delivering multiple benefits for climate, nature, wood production, people and communities, and economic and rural development. So working out how to do this is a key part of the Project Woodland project that I'm involved in relation to the new strategy that's been developed for that. The national target is to increase forest cover from 11% to 18% by 2050. And the Project Woodland surveys, and there's been quite a lot of public consultation done on this in the last while, have shown there to be strong public support for more forests of all different shapes and sizes. So we need now to work out how to get to at least 18% forest cover as quickly as possible, and ideally this decade. And it mightn't be as hard as we think it might be. Like, it means moving from 11% to 18%, which is a 7% shift. Now, unfortunately, some of the land that's already been planted with trees, when those areas are deforested over the next decade, it's not going to be possible to reforest all of that because it would be putting the wrong trees in the wrong places, knowing what we now know about the risks in relation to climate change and nature of planting trees on peatland. But it's a relatively small change in terms of land use, 7 to 10%. And with engagement with farmers and landowners, and it is something that we should be able to work out how to do over the next decade. The third thing then is that we need to manage our peatlands and organic soils to rapidly reduce the release of carbon, but in a way that will work for farmers who depend on this land for their livelihood, and will also deliver benefits for nature and water. And this means, as similarly with the forestry issue, co-creating solutions with farmers and other stakeholders and local communities, but doing it quickly. We really have to inject a sense of urgency into this issue. There's nothing about the climate challenge that's easy. There's a lot of change being asked of all sectors of society. But, my kind of closing comment on you about this is that it would be dumbfounding that we'd even contemplate the possibility of our land continuing to leak thousands of tons of carbon to the atmosphere every day in 2030. So we've got to figure out ways of changing the direction of travel in relation to that. And we can do it in a way which will deliver multiple benefits, that will make it a better country for us all, and will be good for farming communities and society in general. So to do that, it is going to need a concerted effort, building on the recent work on land use that we heard about earlier, and building on the current commitments in the Climate Action Plan. But I'd leave you with the question: why wouldn't we aim for our land to be a net carbon sink by 2030 or even sooner? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matt. A lot of, I suppose, thought-provoking and food for thought there, I think. And, you're talking about some of what you were talking about there is the co-benefits that can be derived in terms of the public participation and trying to bring people with you. But, of course, properly managed forests also have this great benefit in terms of addressing water quality concerns as well. So there's all of those other co-benefits. But look, thanks very much for that. I'm sure we'll pick up some of those points in the discussion that's going to follow.